Hi there. It's September the 9th, and we're continuing our journey through Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. We're in chapter 11 and reading from verses 1 to 15. Having said that Paul having said that he doesn't want to boast in himself, he wants to boast in the Lord, he does here have a little bit of a self-defense, speaking to the things he's been doing and why he's been doing them. He seems to be very concerned about certain people who've come into Corinth and are really setting themselves up against him. He calls them later on in the reading in Greek, hyperlian apostoli, super apostles, we might say. They're claiming to be more than they should be, and they are seeming to trump Paul's credentials by making Paul out to be a very poor second to them. So Paul is first of all very concerned about this. After all, it was Paul who founded the church, who built up the church in Corinth originally, and he says he feels like a father who has betrothed his daughter as a bride to and in this case to Jesus the Messiah, and actually that bride has then been seduced by another suitor and has given up on Jesus, and he's really upset about this and he's hurt about this. And he is accusing these ones who are coming in of being deceivers, that they're of a different spirit. And he argues that actually they are not better than him. He's actually really of the same credentials, or no lesser credentials than those who are claiming their allegiance just now. And he then goes on and says, look, just look at my example. I came to you, I preached the gospel without charge. I actually worked with my hands. Remember that Paul is a tent maker, and therefore he was making tents. And perhaps these super apostles, and by the way, we're not told who they are. We know they're Jewish because later on in chapter 11, Paul refers to them as being Hebrews and of the seed of Abraham. We're not sure if they are those who are teaching the need to obey the law. That doesn't necessarily come over. So we're not sure exactly who these so-called super apostles are, but we do know that they seem to be denigrating Paul's ministry. And they're also pointing to the fact that Paul couldn't actually support himself out of his own ministry. He had to work with his hands, which seemed demeaning if you're a real worker for the Lord. But Paul says, look, I didn't take money from you because I didn't want to be a burden to you, nor did he want to be beholden to them. He didn't want them to become his patron. He didn't want a patronizing relationship. So instead, it says he took support. He received support for what he needed from the Macedonians, from the northern Christians. Here again is this contrast between the Christians in the north, believers in the north, and the believers in Achaia, in the south, in Corinth. And Paul is saying, actually, I did get support from those who weren't going to tie me with a patronizing relationship. He's referring to Macedonia. And so he's saying that he wants to serve them. He wanted to serve them out of love. He wanted to serve them out of care, not like these so-called super apostles who are doing what they're doing to deceive them. And actually at the end of this reading, Paul makes it very clear how he sees them. He says, look, Satan is able to transform himself into even an angel of light. So, he's making the statement. He's making it clear that he thinks those who are coming in as a deception, as messengers of Satan. And Paul clearly is saying he doesn't want the Corinthian believers to follow them. And actually, he says that they will end up misleading them, taking them in a wrong direction. It's very important that we test not just by words, not just by message, but actually by character and personality. The people who speak, their lives need to match their words. And Paul is saying, look, I not only came speaking words to you, my life, my service, my honouring of you matched my message. We need to be constantly, as followers of Jesus, looking for those examples, looking for the message being lived out and not just spoken. Let's take heed of what Paul is saying here. Be encouraged, but also challenged today. Have a very good September 9th.